My true story from Colorado. At her wedding party, my daughter texted, "Just don't show up tonight." So I showed up, with the lawyer holding her wedding contract. And the receipts. "It's my wedding, not some grandma drama theater," she hissed, venom thick in her tone. I had arrived early, their family home, my home once, transformed into a fairy-lit photo booth beneath the archway I'd built with her father. I held a tray of lemon cookies I'd baked that morning, hoping someone might remember they were her favorite when she was 5. Her eyes flicked to the tray with disgust, then snapped back to glare. "Why are you even here early?" She slammed the words out, each like a door shutting in my face. "This isn't about you. Don't talk to guests. Don't cry. Don't mention Dad. Just don't exist for one night. That's all I ask." Stunned, I watched the cookies tremble in my grip. This was their moment, and I was told to vanish. I placed the tray at the far end of the table, the one her father and I built, the one with our initials carved under a corner, hidden now under lace fabric and glossy brochures. Guests in designer suits drifted past, sipping champagne. Her bridesmaids giggled. She looked at them and sneered. "It's like dragging an antique to Coachella," laughter echoed. I adjusted the pearl clip in my silver hair and stepped away, the word antique looping in my chest. This was my home, built with love before she took her first steps. When her father died, I stayed, held this place together, paying taxes, trimming the garden, repairing the roof he patched with his own hands. She suggested I sign over the deed to help with paperwork, said I'd keep living here. I trusted her. We signed a life residency clause. My name remained. Now I walked into the foyer, transformed into a gift table. Amongst mounds of wrapped presents sat my husband's photo, crooked, half hidden behind silk flowers. I reached to straighten it. My daughter's voice cut me off. "Don't touch that. Sheer display," she said, moving the flowers. "We're going for minimalism. Less clutter." I nodded, silent. My voice had shrunk, swallowed by all those chores they called help, and now replaced by, "You're not welcome." Later, out on the patio, my knees ached from years of gardening. I sat on the bench I painted twice. The ceremony chairs faced a tulip bed I'd planted to bloom on her wedding day. They had perfect timing. I thought it was a good omen. A little girl in a frilly dress brushed past and asked, wide-eyed, "Are you the cleaning lady?" She dashed off. I stared at her swinging shoes. I had swept this porch. I had mopped these floors. I had baked lasagna for the bridal showers. I had laughed at her childhood jokes. And now I was a punchline. My phone buzzed, text from her. "Just don't show up tonight." I stared at the screen. Those words were polite, small, but they carried 10 years of erasure. I rose, tracing my palm over the worn brick wall. Marriage and memories were built into this house. Every plank, every hinge, every window pane saw me. A wife, a mother, a carpenter of family roots. They would remember. I used to call this place home. Not a venue, not a rental property. A home. When John died, I was lost. We had bought this house when our daughter was still in diapers. Every shelf, every rose bush, every floorboard creaked with our memories. I stayed here because he still lived in the wallpaper, in the chimney soot, in the grooves of the kitchen table. After the funeral, my daughter said, "Mom, let's put the deed in my name. It'll help with taxes, and I can handle things if anything happens to you." She promised nothing would change. I trusted her. I signed. But I added one clause, the right to remain in my home until my last breath. And I paid everything, property tax, house insurance, repairs. When the roof leaked, I called the handyman. When the lawn overgrew, I pushed the mower with aching knees. But to her friends, I was just staying here. She moved into the master bedroom with her fiancé. I was given the guest room at the back, the one with a tiny window and no closet. She began hosting parties, never asking. Once, I opened the front door to find a stranger dragging a suitcase. "Airbnb," he said. "This is the Simmons cottage, right?" The Simmons cottage. My home. My marriage, my life. I asked her later, "You're renting the basement?" She waved me off. "It's my house, Mom. I don't need to check in." My hands shook, but I said nothing. Mothers are trained to endure in silence. At first, I still cooked Sunday dinners. I made her favorite beef stew. Her fiancé told a guest, "Ruth just loves pretending she's still needed." They all laughed. I stopped cooking. They threw wine nights with loud music. I was told to stay in the back. "We're filming content," she said once, waving her phone. "Try not to walk through the kitchen." I stayed quiet. But the erasure was constant. She removed my name from the mailbox, told the neighbors I was too old to manage the house, moved my photos to a closet. My wedding album vanished from the shelf. I told myself this was the price of being generous. Then came the wedding. She didn't ask. She told me, "We're doing the ceremony on the lawn, the reception inside. Rustic elegance, it's trending." I nodded. A wedding planner came the next day. She moved my teapot, boxed my books, rearranged the living room. John's armchair? Shoved in the garage. I caught them one afternoon in the hallway. "Don't worry," my daughter said. "My parents are dead. This house is just symbolic." The planner hesitated. "I thought your mom—" "She's here." "But not really." Then they both laughed. I stood frozen in the stairwell, invisible. I returned to my room. Not the master bedroom, the laundry-adjacent nook. I sat there, hands in my lap, feeling every year of silence I had swallowed settle into my bones like dust. They had buried me long before the flowers were ordered. But I had the deed and the clause, still valid, still binding. I opened the drawer, pulled out the folder. My name, my signature, the legal terms. Lifetime right of residence, irrevocable without written consent. That night I called Harold. "It's time," I said. And I didn't mean time to cry. I meant time to reclaim what I'd surrendered. The gentle, golden glow in the house felt heavy. It was a reminder that I had allowed a decade of quiet to pass me by. 10 years of swallowing my voice, of staying small while they erased me day by day, so that I might still wear the label of good mother. But the weight of my silence had grown unbearable, pressing into my bones. A few days before the wedding, I spotted the sign again. Simmons Wedding, entrance, $20, 0 cents per person. My breath stilled, not from shock, but from resolve. They were charging admission to my home, my own home. Rather than collapse under the shock, I picked up my phone and began to document everything. The banner hanging over our rose bed, the vendor trucks lining my driveway, the tables stacked with tickets, the archway pressed into the lawn I'd planted years ago. These weren't family heirlooms anymore. They were commercial assets. That night, seated at my small guest room desk with its single lamp, I pulled a plastic folder from beneath the drawer. The cover read, "Ruth Simmons." Inside were neat documents, the original deed, and the crucial clause, "Grantor retains right of uninterrupted residence for life." My finger traced those words as if awakening something powerful within me. I lifted the phone and called Harold. His voice came steady on the first ring. "Ruth?" he asked. I paused before answering. "It's time. They've turned my home into a commercial venture. I've gathered the proof." He was silent, then replied, "Good. I'll meet you tomorrow." When I arrived at Harold's office, a small room with framed diplomas and stacks of legal files, he flipped through the pictures on my thumb drive with a calm intensity. "This is strong," he said, tapping a photo of vendor trucks parked on my lawn. "They're violating your residency rights. A civil injunction is in order." He handed me a draft, 1 page, crisp and legal. I signed without hesitation, the pen firm in my hand. For the first time in years, clarity replaced pain. That afternoon, I moved with quiet purpose. I captured every detail. The plush VIP-only sign clipped to the garden bench her father carved, the vendor van lined with Simmons estate rentals, the guest book lying beside my husband's half-hidden portrait beneath silk roses. I even photographed receipts, linen rentals, sound equipment, floral arrangements, each boldly labeled Simmons Wedding. Every click of the shutter felt like reclaiming a step of my dignity. That evening I laid out the packet. The deed with notarized dates, the legal clause still intact, printed photos and receipts, the signed injunction ready for filing. I dressed simply, dark slacks, a soft blouse, my hair pinned back. No flowers in my hands, no tears in my eyes. My only accessories were truth and the law, carried steady beneath my heart. Alone before the full-length mirror, I saw a different version of myself, not the faded figure they styled for invisibility, but a woman anchored by memory and right. No gown, no forced smile, just quiet resolve. I didn't need applause. I needed justice. When I slipped into bed that night, my pillow didn't soak with tears. Instead, I slept with the weight lifted, a woman who was no longer erased. 10 years of silence had led me here. Now, in the calm pause before the storm, I was ready to reclaim everything they'd tried to take. The night had been planned to perfection. Fairy lights wound through the apple tree, stringing soft golden lanterns above white folding chairs. Caterers in crisp uniforms served shrimp cocktails on silver trays. The vinyl archway stood at the center of the lawn, where my daughter would become someone's bride. Against that scene, I quietly stepped out of Harold's car, dressed in a navy pantsuit, silver hair pinned back. Beside me stood Harold and 2 civil deputies, carrying a sealed envelope marked "Immediate Injunction." I paused at the gate, finger brushing the cool iron. I could already imagine the gasp. "It's her mom!" A flicker of recognition, a burst of shock. I breathed and crossed the threshold. Harold nodded and we walked forward, not as interlopers but as rightful protectors of home. The planner was the first to see us, her eyes narrowing at my figure, dismissed earlier as background scenery. "Mrs. Simmons?" she said, voice polite and forced. I nodded. "I'm here to deliver this." Harold handed her the envelope. She read the label. Unauthorized commercial use, violation of residency rights. Her face paled. A cash payment stopped mid-slide between her fingers. The bride froze mid-SEMO. She had turned just in time to catch the envelope's seal. Her makeup looked untouched under the lantern glow. Her face shifted from elation to confusion. I recognized the woman who had once called me presented but not really present. Now she stared at me as though I were a specter. I looked at her and spoke quietly, but everyone heard. "I never left this house, day or night, and neither did he." I touched the photo frame pinned atop the guest book table, the portrait of my late husband, concentric in candlelight. "Your father never left this house," I said, "and I'm not leaving either." The groom came racing over, voice tight and panicked. "What the hell is this? Are you ruining our wedding?" Harold stepped forward. "Sir, this is a civil injunction. Your wedding at this site is unauthorized commercial activity on private property. You and your vendors are required to cease immediately." A hush fell. Soup plates slid off trays. The sound of guitar strings went silent. For a moment, no one breathed. The bride staggered back, pressing her hand to her chest. This is a nightmare." It wasn't. This was truth. A deputy cleared his throat. "We ask that all non-residents vacate the property immediately. No shouting, no hostility, just the quiet authority of civil law." My daughter glanced at me, tears welling. "Mom, please." I stood quietly, breathing through the tension. This wasn't vindication. It was necessary justice. Our guests began to file out, confused whispers trailing behind them. The groom argued. "We're paying. We booked stuff, invites went out. This is crazy." The deputy looked at the injunction. "Your permit includes no proper zoning or business license. Residence follows the person who's named as owner. Mrs. Simmons retains full rights." They were forced to step aside. The caterers began lowering serving trays. The string quartet folded chairs. Guests left behind ruined programs and half-drunk champagne flutes. The wedding planner looked at me, pleading. "Please, can we finalize? Can we work around this?" I shook my head softly. "No." She swallowed, glancing back at my daughter, crying now, trembling with grief. Then came the moment when I realized how deeply they had erased me. My daughter's trembling shoulders, the groom's panic, the guests' confusion, all for an illusion on top of someone else's life. "I built this home," I said, voice steady. "We built it together. These walls know every handshake, every midnight laugh. You forgot that, okay?" "But I didn't." She sank to the grass, slipping off her shoes. I heard sobs. The planner took the envelope back. Harold motioned to the deputies. Quietly, they began escorting vendors, clearing rental trucks, flashing IDs at those who tried to linger. My daughter looked at me, then away. "Mom, you can't." I stepped forward. This time not silent, not small. "I can," I said, "because I'm here, and because this place is more than an event space. It's my home." She closed her eyes. Something in her gaze broke, maybe regret, maybe shame, maybe relief that finally someone had spoken. The guests stood awkwardly on the sidelines, unsure whether to applaud or flee. A neighbor I recognized from across the street whispered to another, "That's her mom. She owns the place." For the first time in years I felt seen, not as a forgettable help, not as a footnote. The groom's shoulders slumped, his voice quieter now. "Can't we just talk?" I shook my head. "Not tonight." The deputies escorted him and the photographer off the lawn. The planners shuttered tables, the patio lights dimmed. Someone unplugged a speaker. Then my daughter crouched to my feet, tears soaking her dress. She whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry, please. Don't." I shook my head. "Not tonight." She looked at me with raw pain in her eyes, an echo of that morning's contempt. I recognized the shadow of my own grief in her posture. A deputy approached and placed an official notice of termination of unauthorized use on the guestbook table. My daughter knelt beside me in the grass. She touched my hand. "It's my fucking wedding," she said, voice trembling. "It's supposed to be my day." "It was never your day to rewrite my memories," I whispered. Between us stood the consequences of erasure. She looked at the photo of her father, our hands carved into the wood frame by his own carving. She carefully lifted the portrait. Then she looked to me. "Mom, I'll take it down," she promised. I nodded. They had to clear out vendors and guests. The deputies stood by, and slowly the crowd dispersed into the night. I watched her walk away, barefoot, fragile, lost. I stayed behind, staring at the table. The portrait lay cradled in her arms, petals of my own garden scattered around. Silence settled afterward, like a sigh. I turned to Harold. "Thank you." He nodded. "You did what was right." "No," I said softly. "I did what had to be done." I stayed through the tears, the packing, the quiet departing. Eventually I escorted my daughter and her husband to the driveway. Their car engine idled. The bride paused. With shaking resolve, she stepped out and closed the trunk. I did not say goodbye. I stood by the front door, hands folded. When they pulled away, nothing fell apart. Just a gentle hush where celebration had tried to stand. Closing the door, I pressed my palm to the wood. It was solid under my knuckles, strong, immovable, mine. Inside, I lit a lamp, watered the old rosebush by the porch, and spread the unauthenticated wedding programs across the kitchen counter. Then I found a single line from her vows on the paper. "Forever starts here." I smiled. Not bitterly, softly. Yes. Forever starts here. With the house claimed, the silence broken. With me, the night air settled through the open window. I brushed away a petal that had drifted in. Silence filled the corners. This was my home again. There would be painful conversations tomorrow, apologies or not, reckonings or not. But tonight, I reclaimed it. And I didn't have to vanish. 3 days later, early in the morning, I was on the porch with a cup of tea, staring at the oak tree I'd planted when she was born. The air felt quiet, neither celebratory nor tense. Just a house returning to itself. I heard a soft, hesitant knock at the gate. I didn't expect her. We hadn't spoken since that torn photograph lay on the grass. Slowly, I walked down the steps, tea cooling in my hand. There she was, my daughter, barefoot, coat forgotten, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. Behind her, my son-in-law stood stiffly on the driveway, arms crossed, anger and shame entwined in his posture. She said nothing at first, just stared at the latch between us. I waited. Finally, her voice cracked. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Before she could finish, her husband stepped forward. "Look, this has gotten out of hand. This is just extreme." His voice hardened the tension. He leaned in toward the gate. "Let her in. Now." I made no move. I simply raised a calm finger to my lips. Silence. My daughter uncrossed her arms and dropped to her knees on the driveway, 10 light taps on the concrete. She whispered, "Mom, please, they told me I could come home. I'm begging." I felt the tears well up, not from the gestures, but from how deeply the words echoed. She had once told me not to exist for a night. Now she asked to be let back into life? I said nothing. She stayed there, knee to the concrete, her wedding dress crumpled in the back seat of their car. Then, in a low, shaky voice, she said, "They couldn't set up another venue. All their plans collapsed. I thought you'd forgive. I thought—" Her hope broke as she looked at me. I realized then that she thought forgiveness was a given, that my silence meant my presence, always. But I wasn't silent anymore. The sun rose higher, warming her coatless skin. The rosebush behind her opened its buds toward the light. I bent down, brushing a loose petal from her hair. "I didn't expect you to beg," I said softly. "When you said don't show up, you meant it. You built it on my inheritance, on my absence." She lifted a tearful glance. "I was ashamed. I thought it would be easier if you'd just go away." "Easier," I repeated. The word hung between us like a fracture. Then, "So I did." She bowed her head. "Mom, I love you. I miss you. I see now. The wedding wasn't about us. It was about what we thought we deserved." I held a silence. Behind her, her husband unfolded his arms, his face unreadable. She lifted her gaze. "Can I come inside? Just talk." The openness in her voice gave me something unguarded, a shifting corner in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was a girl asking to borrow my knitting needles. But this wasn't a moment for kindness or tears or reassurance. This was a moment about boundaries, about respect, about safety. "I am not saying yes," I said. "I am not saying no." She blinked slowly. We stood across the threshold, past the gate, between old paving stones, between past and present. She exhaled. "I'll wait." And she did. She knelt for 10 minutes while the breeze stirred her dress around her knees. Occasionally she looked up, just once, catching my eye. Sadness and longing mixed there like rain and sunshine. Finally she rose and stood, hands clasped in front of her. She backed away from the gate, turning toward the street. Her husband reached out, touched her shoulder. They walked off slowly, the gate closing softly behind them. I watched until their tail lights disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the gate behind me and went inside. I placed a fresh rose in a vase by the front window and poured a new cup of tea. I was home, my home again, and the echo of her apology still lingered. The first envelope arrived on a Wednesday. No return address, just my name, scribbled hastily, like someone hoping I would recognize the handwriting and soften. I didn't open it. I placed it on the mantel beside the framed photo of John and lit a small candle. The next day came the emails. Dozens, some signed, some anonymous. All begging, all bargaining. "We miss you. It was the stress of the wedding. You know how much pressure I was under." And then, like clockwork, the flowers. A bouquet of tulips, her favorite as a child, was delivered with a pink ribbon and a note in shaky cursive. "Grandma, Mommy said you'll forgive us soon. She promised. I miss you. Can I come over?" My granddaughter. I read the note 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it beside John's photo. "They don't know what love means anymore," I whispered. "Not love that comes without leverage, not the kind that never asked for payment in return." I made tea, watered the roses, repaired the hinge on the side gate. I returned to my life, not the quiet corner they once exiled me to, but the whole house. The full light of morning, the kitchen, the porch, the garden, all mine again. Then came the threat. It arrived in a thick business-white envelope bearing the logo of a local law firm. Inside was a letter. Cold, sterile, disconnected. My daughter had filed a claim, questioning my mental fitness. They were petitioning for conservatorship. The very woman who told her friends I was dead now claimed I was unfit to manage my own life, that I was delusional, emotionally unstable, and mentally declining, that I had fabricated legal documents and was hoarding a property she described as abandoned by reason of psychological decline. I did not panic. I walked to the drawer beside the cedar chest and retrieved my paperwork. Annual mental health certificate, cognition test, property maintenance receipts, tax filings, photos from the wedding, every table setting, every rental truck, every vendor form with her signature. I called Harold. "She's filing for conservatorship," I said. "Claims I'm unstable." Harold sighed through the phone. "You're the most lucid woman I know, Ruth." He filed a countersuit by the next morning. Defamation, malicious legal action, and violation of tenancy protections. We attached documentation from my doctor. And then the final blow, video footage of her on her wedding day. telling the planner I was dead, calling me clutter, calling me just Ruth. The court dismissed her filing within 72 hours. There was no apology, no flowers this time, just a halt in the letters. The silence returned. But this time it was not cold. It was earned. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the shadows shift across the living room I once built with John. I touched the edge of his photo and smiled. They may try to write me out, I said, but I was never the footnote. I was the story. And the mailbox? It still stands, but I no longer open it for everyone. Only for those who remember who I really am. The days settled into quiet again, but not the kind that stings. I woke early each morning and stepped barefoot onto the porch, the air still crisp, the grass kissed with dew. I took my tea in a real mug, no more plastic lids or trays tucked near the dryer, just steam rising from bone china, the kind they used to say was too delicate for Grandma to use. The house creaked and sighed, the way old homes do when they're finally loved again. I patched the gutter John had always meant to fix. I oiled the hinges on the guest room door, even if no one would stay there. I swept the hallway every Saturday, even though no one tracked mud through it anymore. There was dignity in tending what they tried to steal. Sometimes, I would find myself standing in front of the mirror, brushing my hair with slower strokes, not because I wanted to look younger, but because for the first time in years, I recognized the woman staring back. Not Ruth the burden, not just Ruth, but the woman who had once held a family together until they mistook the stitching for weakness. I tended to John's roses in the backyard. They'd grown wild during the wedding chaos, overrun with ribbons and signs and rented memories. I cut them back, gently, speaking to them like I used to when he was alive. "We're still here, love," I'd whisper, "and they're gone." One afternoon, Patricia from next door came by with tomatoes in a basket. She sat on my porch swing, wiping her forehead. "Don't you get lonely?" she asked gently. I sipped my tea, watching the light dance on the leaves. "I was lonelier when they were here," I said. "Lonely isn't about who's around, it's about who sees you. I was invisible in my own home. Now I see myself again." She nodded, eyes wet. "You're stronger than I'd be," I shook my head. "Not strength, just clarity. Strength fights. Clarity lets go. Sometimes." I passed the guest room and lingered in the doorway. The bed was made, the curtains drawn. A small notebook sat on the desk beside a vase of wildflowers. Not because I expected visitors, but because if someone ever came, someone who truly wanted to listen, they'd have a place to sit, a place where no one would call them clutter. I replaced the curtains in the living room, painted the walls soft cream, John's favorite. I even brought out the tea set they'd once said was too fancy for Grandma's corner. Now I use it every Sunday. At the real table, the one I built with John, the one where my name is carved under the corner, in letters so small they forgot to check. One morning, the Henderson boy mowed my lawn without asking. His mother waved from across the street. A casserole sat on my porch step when I came home from the clinic. People remembered me again, not with pity, but with respect. Not as background noise, but as the woman who endured and remained. When someone asked, "Do you miss your family?" I answered honestly, I miss who they were before they forgot who I was. I didn't say it with anger, just acceptance, because I no longer waited to be remembered. I had already remembered myself. It was a Tuesday when the letter came, folded carefully, sealed with a crooked heart drawn in red ink. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Not my daughter's, no. It was the younger one, my granddaughter, the quiet child who used to follow me from room to room without saying a word, who watched and noticed and never once told me I was in the way. I sat on the porch to read it, the light soft through the morning trees. "Dear Grandma, I know now. I didn't want to, but I do. Mom says you're being bitter, but I remember how you made pancakes without being asked. I remember how your lap always smelled like cinnamon. I remember you never got mad, even when they forgot your birthday. I didn't see it before, but I do now, and I won't forget. Love, E." I closed my eyes, holding the paper to my chest, not because it hurt, but because, for once, it didn't. It healed. I rose, slowly, stepping inside to place the letter beside John's photo. His eyes smiled back through glass polish just that morning. "She remembered me, darling," I whispered. "Not what I did. Not what I cooked. Me." The candle flickered beside his urn. I lit it. The house no longer echoed with footsteps that avoided mine. No more laughter that paused when I entered a room. No more passive sighs when I tried to help. Just quiet. But the good kind. The kind that cradles you like an old quilt, warm from the dryer. The kind that says, "You're safe now." I still made soup. Out of habit, I still watered the roses John planted, still walked to the mailbox every Thursday, still swept the porch at dawn, because peace deserves clean steps to land on, but I no longer waited for them. Not for my daughter's voice. Not for the clatter of apology disguised as performance. I had learned that forgiveness does not mean invitation. And grace is a door you can close without slamming. One evening, another envelope arrived. Gold foiled, addressed in stiff calligraphy. Inside, a 10-page letter from my daughter, scripted, defensive, carefully curated to sound remorseful without surrendering control. She mentioned therapy, regret, miscommunication. Not once did she say, "I was cruel." I didn't respond. I placed it with the others, in the drawer beside my will, where my story now lives in paper and proof. A testament that I had existed, not just endured. A week later, I found a soft scarf tied around the gate, pale blue, the color of my old gardening gloves. No note, just presence. And that, I suppose, was enough. Because I had spent years being present for everyone, without expectation, without applause. Now, I showed up for myself. Every morning, I brewed the tea I used to forget to drink. I sat at the table they once called too much for Grandma. I lit the candle beside John's urn, not for grief, but for gratitude. Because I had survived being unseen, and then I had chosen to be known by the only person whose permission I ever truly needed, my own. Outside, birds sang, not out of obligation, but simply because they could. Inside, I laughed softly to myself, ran a hand over the frame of John's photo and said, "I'm not a shadow anymore, my love." Then I opened the window wide and let the morning carry me, not into memory, but into everything of mine. A soft knock came one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the porch light flickered on its own. I set my teacup down, a habit I still hadn't broken, and walked to the door. When I opened it, I saw the wedding planner standing there, her expression uneasy and eyes glistening. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, voice shaking. But something happened. Behind her, a man stepped forward, her husband, I later learned, holding a framed photograph wrapped in cloth. He cleared his throat. "We found this in the venue before we left. I considered throwing it away, but then I saw your handwriting on the back." I recognized the script immediately. "Built with Love, January 1990. It was the photo we had taken the day I and John finished the porch swing, the swing that still sits in the yard. They had come not as guests, not as vendors, but as messengers. "I didn't know," she whispered. I never asked. We thought she was. Gone. Gone. As if I'd been erased from existence. She admitted they'd treated the house like a blank canvas, rented out rooms, erased portraits, removed traces of its true history. She told me the groom, too, had felt uneasy during the wedding, a whisper of regret behind each smile. I looked down at the photograph, then back at her. "It's more than a venue," I said softly. "It's someone's life." Tears formed at her eyes. "I want to restore it. I want to help." I didn't say anything right away. The sky was darkening and the world felt hushed. Then I took a breath and nodded. 6 months later, the house was blooming again, not from new renovations, but from restoration. The old piano returned. The portrait of John reclaimed its place on the mantel. The swing had fresh stain and oil. I had added a new rose, foot high, planted with care. On a bright, crisp morning, the wedding planner organized a small gathering. No music, no cameras, no ceremony. Just neighbors, a few friends, and the planner herself, handing me a new framed photograph. It was of the swing day, all three of us, I, younger but still me, John with his hand on the swing, and a little girl, my daughter, smiling without makeup or pose, wearing braces and pink sneakers. She looked so free in that photo. Unasked, she hugged my waist. She was gone from that memory. I took the frame and held it gently, feeling the wood grain under my fingertips. The planner's husband said, "She asked us to come today to honor the real family home and to ask you if she can help maintain it, as compensation, as gratitude." Tears slid down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from the unexpected turn of grace. I turned to them and said, "No compensation, no thanks required, but perhaps a promise?" They nodded, knowing what it meant. From that day on, the house was shared again, on my terms. The planners became friends. The neighbors helped tend the garden. Children played on the lawn during weekend brunches I invited them to. My granddaughter visited again and sat on the swing. We laughed and told stories. My daughter never came back. Not yet. I don't know if she will. But the house doesn't ache for her absence anymore. It hums with new life. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of a name you were once called but no longer answer to, or a home that forgot the hands that built it, then I hope you carry this moment with you. Because this was never just about a house. It was about memory, boundaries, and the quiet revolution that begins when a woman finally says, "No more." You see, for a long time I thought being silent meant being kind, that keeping peace meant keeping quiet. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's a slow erasure, a fading. And sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is not disappear. I didn't raise my voice, I raised my standards. And I didn't get revenge, I reclaimed my space. If you've ever sat at the edge of your own life, watching others write the story for you, then you know the ache I'm talking about. But it's never too late to turn the page, to pick up the pen, to write your own name back into the story. That's what Grandma True Stories is here for. This isn't just a channel, it's a home for every woman who has endured, sacrificed, been overlooked, underestimated, or outright erased. For every caregiver who is never cared for every mother turned ghost in her own living room. Each week, I'll be here, sharing stories not from fantasy, but from the front lines of family, of betrayal and dignity, of justice and grace. Stories they told us to forget, but we didn't, and now we remember them out loud. So if this story made you feel seen, I invite you, no, I urge you, to subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because the world may not always listen to women like us, but here we listen to each other, we hold each other's truth, and we never call wisdom bitterness again. Click that subscribe button. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, not just in their ears, but in their bones, send it to them. The porch light is on, the tea is warm, and the stories? We're just getting started. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where silence ends and legacy begins.